Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Feminism, Fascism, and the Future, and welcome to the first in our series of mini episodes. My name is Harper, and this is I Went to a Really Cool Conference in London with My Professor. I'm Laurie's research assistant, and in February, we attended the Transnational Anti-Gender Movements and Resistance Conference, hosted by the Gender Studies Department of the London School of Economics. I learned so much from the incredible people at the conference. The anti-gender ideology movement really is global, shape-shifting, and fascist, although the term fascism is still up for some debate. Some call it neo-fascism and others post-fascism, but whatever it is, it's scary. I stood witness to these facts by the professors, community members, and activists from around the world who shared their work with us. Here's some of what I learned. Oh, wait. First, let's set the scene. You deserve a trip to London too, after all. You step out onto the street, finally a chance to breathe. The previous morning, you boarded a little plane in Burlington, Vermont, transferred at JFK, and got on another plane to London. It should be night when you arrive, but it's morning in the UK, and you barely have enough time to get through customs and drop your suitcase at the Airbnb before the first panel. At this point, you've been awake for close to 20 hours and still have a full conference day ahead of you. So here I have a question for you. How many coffees will you have today on this cloudy day in London? How many do you think Laurie and I had? Stick around and maybe I'll expose us at the end. Okay, sorry, I promise that now we're at the classroom where we're supposed to be. And would you look at that? We're just in time for a coffee break. This is where our learning begins. I'm so glad you could make it. There were several panels throughout the day, and I took a lot of notes, like a lot. I'll try my hardest not to keep you here too long. Alia Amirali spoke on the anti-gender ideology movement in Pakistan and drove home the very important reminder that, quote, resistance is necessary but not sufficient. The idea is to move past resisting and toward radical transformation through three types of change: structural, social, and personal. These changes require organizing and coming together in community, not to disappear or resolve issues, but to have conversations. So, our big takeaway from Aliyah is that we need to organize and commit to personal, social, and structural transformation. Activism and resistance is not enough. Sumi Maddock also stressed organizing as a crucial aspect of real change. She was clear in her points. We desperately need a critical mass of scholars and activists connected through a network of interventions and resistance groups. The network must be transnational, decolonial, anti-colonial, and interdisciplinary. It is not enough to be many individuals fighting this fight. We must gather in community and solidarity. We must make a movement that is organized, full of diversity across every axis of difference. This is not a threat that can be addressed in singular spaces or from singular perspectives and types of knowledge. For this reason, Sumi also emphasized the importance of creating new imaginations, vocabularies, concepts, theories, and strategies. The right is doing a phenomenal job of using language and strategies that appeal to their audience, making it accessible and emotion-based. We need to move out of the academic sphere and create a movement that appeals to larger audiences across disciplines and communities. Again and again, these ideas of community building and learning from one another appeared during this conference. I think it's fairly apparent that within feminist spaces and academic institutions, there's a tendency to focus on debate and critique. One of the biggest lessons I took away from this conference is the idea that playing defense not only divides us from the other, but also from ourselves and each other. Instead of interacting primarily on the discursive level, we need to open ourselves to the idea that every conversation has the potential to teach us something. Let's bring the focus to engagement for connection, understanding, and gaining knowledge. A competitive framing is not the only, nor best way to do this. So here's a goal, for you and for me, for all of us. Next time a difficult conversation comes up, let's ask ourselves what we can learn from the person we're engaging with. It could be a friend, a family member, a stranger. As Kath Brown stressed in her discussions, we all have something to learn from each other. How can you connect with the people around you to better create avenues of understanding and communication? It's not an easy question, just as there's no easy solution to building an effective movement. Luckily, there are already a lot of impressive people working with us. People who made me feel something listening to them, something deep, something moving. My highlight of the conference was getting to hear Tuba Sayed and Judith Butler in conversation with each other during the first day's keynote panel. The knowledge and devotement to this issue was apparent from each of them, and left me feeling inspired, emotional, and awed. I'll attempt to do the ideas justice and convey the brilliance that was bestowed upon me. Tuba Sayed is a grassroots organizer and gender researcher in Pakistan. I could have listened to her for hours. She's one of those people that left me thinking, how did I not know about this incredible person? How many brilliant, caring people are out there in the world? Here's some personal favorites of what she said.
We're living in very difficult times. We inhabit a brutalized and a brutalizing world. With the climate catastrophe, the settler colonialism, imperialism, the growing class inequalities, the violent heteropatriarchy, the anti-gender movement, the list is very long. It is very clear that we no longer have the choice to prioritize one fight over another. And here I'm particularly talking to the left, but also talking to those who are fighting for the right for gender identity to be recognized, for the right to life. It has to be a collective fight, in my opinion. It is no longer a fight which, no longer a debate about which fight is primary and which is secondary and which is tertiary and which comes after the revolution, and which one to fight first and second. I think we have to take all of them on together. We can no longer afford to do this, play this oppression Olympics. It's too late for that. Our fight then has to be not just about reacting and responding to this, but organizing in the face of all of this. I think it's important to understand that we don't have to react and respond. We have to organize. And I think for me, it's been very important to make this distinction between activism and organizing. For me, activism basically means to show up, to raise your voice, to say something and perhaps then disappear. But organizing requires, long-term commitments. It's tedious, it's boring, it's not always fun. And I think that's what the world needs right now. All these different crises, but there's also a crisis of imagination, which we don't take that seriously. And I think we are all suffering from this analysis paralysis, where we overanalyze things instead of understanding that what we really need is radical compassion to build solidarities, to build networks, to build organizations that will fight, our own states, but also build a global internationalist politics which works for most of us. I have a strong and firm belief that this world order can no longer sustain itself. It is crumbling. We shall see the day where the powers that be will fall.
Pretty powerful stuff. Tuba ended her talk with a well-deserved standing ovation.
Thank you so much.
To learn more about Tuba and explore some of her writing, check out our website, linked in the show description. If you are not yet awakened to the Judith Butler universe, hey, hi, good morning. Judith Butler is a professor, author, and activist, famous for their many books and early conceptualization of the social and performative constructions of gender. They just released a new book, Who's Afraid of Gender, which I will hopefully be doing an episode on soon. Let's hear Judith.
They understand themselves as not doing harm at all, but doing good. And they conceive of rights stripping or fatal abandonment as activities that will help to restore a world they understand themselves to have lost. The accelerated normalization of rights stripping can lead to fascist political formations and exemplify the operation of what I'm calling fascist passions. A passion implies being affected by something from the outside and undergoing that in a way that does not feel fully in one's control. A passion is something relatively ungovernable. The mind cannot master a passion. A passion always more or less governs the mind, leaving one both out of control and excited, excited to be out of control, excited finally to be out of control, ungoverned and ungovernable. Something lawless is in the air. Lawless, and yet, in the name of a morality realized in deprivation and dispossession of others. The experience of what is right under such conditions becomes self-righteous moralism, and it permits of various kinds of cruelty in the name of what is considered right and good. It's actually not morality, which would have to explain the principles by which it acts. No, it is an excited moralism outside the law, now operating within the law, freeing those most besieged by hatred to do harm, to incite and circulate hatred in the name of what is right. All this can happen apart from a fascist state or a thoroughly fascist society, for fascism begins as a trend, a potential. Thus, it is our obligation as critics to find and oppose those potentials before they saturate society and its state structures. We do not have to see a fully fledged fascist state to say that fascist trends and practices are happening now when various vulnerable communities are targeted with rights stripping, fatal abandonment to perilous conditions, and slow and quick forms of killing are becoming the norm, assisted by exhilarated forms of moralism. Gender, a category that describes the division of labor, the organization of states, the unequal distribution of power, has never been merely cultural, but it is cast that way by opponents who want to identify the source of the destruction at the cultural level. Once identified as a cause of destruction, gender itself must be destroyed. And what follows is censorship, the de-departmentalization of gender studies and women's studies, the stripping of rights of healthcare, increased pathologization, the repeal or rejection of laws that protect against discrimination, violent marginalization, and the erosion of democratic norms, to name a few. Once gender comes to include abortion rights, access to reproductive, gender and sexual health services, trans rights, women's freedom and equality, queer of colors freedom struggles, single parenting, gay parenting, new kinship outside of heteronormative models, adoption rights, sex reassignment, gender confirming surgery, sex education, books for young people, books for adults, images of nudity, banned now in the state of Texas. I mean, the entire Renaissance collection is having then it represents a wide range of political struggles that its opponents seek to shut down in their effort to restore an authoritarian patriarchal order for the state, religion, and the family. This is not just a backlash, this is a restoration project. In thinking about our own strategies of resistance, it's crucial that gender politics oppose neoliberalism and other forms of capitalist devastation and not become their instrument. That gender politics militate against the continuation of colonization and all forms of racism, including those afflicting migrants, and that it takes its stand within expanding alliances. It cannot be an identity politics and still create the world in which we all want to live, because it is by virtue of our interdependency that we stand a chance of surviving and flourishing. And I think to build those worlds, quite frankly, we have to make truth sexy again. We have to have a different version of humanity and cohabitation that would be more desirable than any fascist illusion, right? More desirable. So making truth sexy, making equality, freedom, and justice deeply desirable and freely imaginable. And for that, we need our sociologists and our political scientists, but we also need our artists and our poems.
Syed and Butler were just two of the many brilliant panelists. Other speakers touched on the use of humor and fun, the need to move out of a reactive mode, knowledge production and translation projects as forms of resistance, and holding our rage as sacred power. In addition to the speakers, we heard from many attendees as well, professors, activists, students. Here's what we asked them.
So, as you know, we have this podcast, and we're going to do a mini podcast about this conference. So, I was wondering if you would tell us your name, what you do, and one thing you'd want our listeners to know from being at this conference. Like, what's the one thing you need people to know about the anti-gender ideology movement, about solidarities?
Let's start with Stella.
I'm Annemieke van Stralen, and I am a pro-choice activist and organizer in the Netherlands. And something that has got me thinking like these past days and today again is how are we bridging the gap between what is happening in the bubble of science and academia and what we need to do as a movement in which scholars are also part of, but also me as an activist, because there's so much societal urgency as to what the researchers here are researching, that there needs to be a better and more direct link in what I'm experiencing at the forefront and then what is happening here at universities like LSE. I'm very positive that in 5 or 10 years, we are going to have maybe not as equally strong, but we're getting there, like in this transnational activist movement too. If they can do it, why the fuck can we?
Right. If only we had the billionaires to back us, but I think we can anyway. We have some institutional power.
Exactly, and maybe there's also some very rich progressive people around.
Maybe there are, and they could help create the translation project between academia and activism, like this podcast. And if anyone's listening and there's a billionaire out there who would like to support us, we'd like to do this full time, and we'd like 20 people on staff. Well, thank you so much. I really
Thank you.
it.
Next, we have a group of professors from the UK offering some insight to the higher education context, especially in comparison to United States universities.
Hi, my name is Emma Jones. I'm a lecturer in gender and education at the UCL Institute of Education. And here at this conference, it's been really wonderful and I was talking to Sarah about this earlier, about how finally there is a sense that some of the trauma around the anti-gender worldview has been worked through, and that people are now starting to come up with solutions and to be thinking not just with theory but around the move from activism to organising, and that's been really, really galvanising for me.
Excellent, thank you.
I'm Sarah Bragg. I'm an associate professor at UCL Institute of Education as well. And I'm here, again, I think I agree with Emma that there has been a lot of trauma associated with anti-gender campaigning and its relative success. And so to feel part of a counter movement has been really important, and to kind of be in such impressive company. I think, I've spent my time constantly making notes on more things to read, more incredibly well-informed perspectives to connect to. And I think also what I have enjoyed about the conference is that it's enacting a kind of egalitarianism in terms of the people who are speaking at it come from a very wide range of positions and perspectives. PhD students and professors, people who've been doing it decades, people who sort of more recently come to it. So thank you.
I'm Evie Table from the UCL Centre for Longitudinal Study. I'm a research fellow. I think for me, it's been just super rewarding having so many people from lots of different contexts, as it's being said, different activists, different countries, and then sort of having that sense of sort of solidarity and sort of empathy with what's going around in the world, and particularly that kind of context of feeling that sort of despair that often comes with working in these spaces, or having kind of any awareness in these spaces, and actually knowing that people are doing the work and there's things happening that trying to find solutions and analyze it and properly examine what's going on. It's really, really exciting.
Hi, I'm Asya. I'm a lecturer in gender and work at the University of Leeds. I just arrived here an hour ago, but I'm very excited to be here. I think for me, the value of this conference is really in the transnational conversations that it's having. And these are obviously not straightforward conversations to have. They're immensely complex, as some of the discussions already show. So thinking about the specificities of contexts, but then also trying to forge global solidarities. And it's great to hear from such brilliant speakers about them.
I just wonder if we could talk for a second about the trauma. Can you talk a bit more? I mean, I think I know what you mean, but could you tell me what you mean?
More than 10 years ago, when I first did my master's at the Institute of Education, we were having a conversation then. It was a staff-student LGBT network about whether or not we were going to join Stonewall, an LGBT organisation. And at the time, 10 years ago, we were having this conversation and saying, do you know what? Stonewall's just so far behind the times. We can do it better. Fast forward 10 years, and our institution has left Stonewall and all the protections that Stonewall affords. And we are in such a different place. We're in a place where, and this comes from research, so I'm also speaking about some research that's soon to be published on our institution, where we have testimony of staff, LGBT staff at our institution, who have left because of the transphobia that the institution now upholds. We have testimony of LGB people who are feeling less safe at work, and that is in their research, that is in their teaching, that is in the everyday movement around the space. And that's the legacy of this, and the trauma in a workplace that so recently felt not only safe, but we can really push the boundaries of this place. And so the idea of something like academic freedom now, and the way that this term is being mobilized, it's never been free. Academic freedom has never been free, and what we're seeing now is those that can speak are those that have historically and continue to occupy positions of privilege, and the marginalized voices, they aren't free in this version of academic freedom that we're seeing.
Do you find a similar trans-exclusionary feminism, I'll call it feminism for lack of a better word, at Leeds? I mean, is it just UCL? Is it happening everywhere in the UK? What's going on?
I mean, I would say it's happening everywhere in the UK. Again, I haven't been at Leeds long enough to comment on it, but I was just thinking as you were speaking, we are talking here quite broadly about anti-gender mobilizations, and we're often thinking about government, states, but of course this is also very much about academic institutions, isn't it?
Yeah. It's not surprising, right? I mean, fascist movements always take over academic institutions. I guess one of the things that surprised me as someone for the US is I don't think it's happening in the same way. We have the right wing, and they're using academic freedom and free speech to sort of poke at people and create protests so they can see those people are liberal and they're violent, etc. But I don't think it's happening. We don't have the same strength of a trans-exclusionary feminism within the academy there. So it's an interesting phenomenon to watch what's happening in the UK. I'm not saying it couldn't come, and I've talked to people at the University of Mexico who had very similar experiences, but I haven't seen it happen yet. We're just being attacked by the right? They're just shutting down departments and making things illegal. I mean, Florida has shut down, gender studies, black studies, ethnic studies. Now they've made sociology. You can't teach sociology as part of the core curriculum because it's too woke. So we are being attacked by the right. Don't get me wrong, things are terrible. Don't come to the U.S. But we don't have this same implosion. I think we have more like a outside attack happening.
But that's what I was thinking just as you were talking, there is also something quite specific about the way it works, right? So the kinds of things you're talking about is actually using institutional mechanisms to shut down voices. That's quite insidious, and that is fairly common here in this UK higher education context, and maybe that is what sets it apart from the kind of thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, and maybe it's, maybe, I don't know if I believe in the activism academic split, but maybe feminisms in the US were less based on a belief in essential difference for a variety of reasons. And because there was a strong current of that here or in France or in Mexico, of that much more essentialist feminism or radical feminism, it's always been a kind of marginalized sort of feminism. Not always, but since the 1970s, I think. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know. Or maybe we're so under attack by the right that nobody's attacking each other. I can't figure it out.
And last but not least, let's hear from Florence.
My name's Florence Wallachar. I'm a PhD student at the Gender Department at the London School of Economics, and I'm also a civil society organiser. I think one of the things I've taken away from the conversations here today is that network building and transnational solidarity is essential to work against anti-gender movements. So we've had people from academics to civil society practitioners to activists all in the room, and sharing our knowledge and experiences with each other and building relationships and connections is one of the best things that we can do to build solidarity and counter these movements.
I think Florence really said it all. What we're thinking, what we learned. Organize, organize, organize. Build networks, make connections. Stand in solidarity across differences. Fight for a feminist future. And support causes already exploring these solutions. We heard about a lot of cool research projects in the works, some of which have been finished in the months since the conference. An episode looking at these projects is in production, so stay tuned to hear more from the experts and the incredible work they're producing. And don't worry, I didn't forget about my little question. How many cups of coffee is enough to stay awake, but not enough to send us into a panic attack? It turns out, we lost count. A big thank you to Laurie Essig, my professor, advisor, and tour guide. Also thanks to Allison Seeger for production help, and to the Transnational Anti-Gender Movements and Resistance Conference organizers. And thank you for coming to London with me.